All right, everyone, we are here with episode 3 of the Young and Hungry podcast. I'm here with Dana Baker. No need to introduce us. I was on, well, if you want to see my introduction, go to the first episode. If you want to see Dana's introduction, watch the second episode if you haven't already. But you should watch both of them because, of course, they're pretty good. But yeah, so today we're doing a Q&A. It's part 1 of a 2, maybe 3-part Q&A. We do have a fair amount of questions to go through. But we don't just want to fly through them. We actually kind of want to try to elaborate on each question, obviously, and give out some good information and insight. That's obviously why you guys asked us the questions. So it's not going to be like a rapid fire thing. That wouldn't be very fun. So we're going to get it going. We're just going to get right into it. No need to talk about ourselves on this one. I'm sure we'll do plenty of that in the upcoming episodes.
Yeah, we never talk about ourselves.
Yeah, we just did that for an hour before we started.
Yeah, get it out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. We know what to do now. We just get it out of the way before we start recording. Okay, so thoughts on marijuana usage while bodybuilding. So Dana, what are your thoughts on marijuana if you're a bodybuilder?
I think it's, of course, very generalized, like whether you're a bodybuilder or not. One thing I know that people don't do with it is they generalize, like they're like marijuana, but it's like, okay, are we talking like edibles? Are you,
Let's talk about weed, like the ones like
the bud,
get you high, the weed that gets you high.
Okay, so yeah, I think it has its place because there's a lot of things that I think it can replace in terms of like a bunch of guys taking a bunch of Advil and
like benefits. What are the benefits?
Okay, benefits. I would say, especially if you're in contest prep and you're on really, really high androgens, for a lot of people, it can make them a lot more sociable and approachable. Like instead of being so, because literally your sympathetic nervous system when you're in prep and if you're taking PEDs, you're taking higher androgen ones, you're just super tense, you're dieting. So for a lot of guys, it can actually kind of balance that mood. And I know that that's been a huge game changer for me, just being able to actually respond like, not what?
You smoke weed?
No.
Just kidding.
But the other thing is too, especially same situation for sleep as well. There's, and a lot of these things, like for instance, I know a lot of people in a lot of cases where they've limited their use of like anti-anxiety medication, sleeping medication, basically things that they're going to use anyways to deal with a problem, but you're using a plant. So I think it's legal too. So you're not, buying sleeping meds off your buddy or, trying to, because I've seen people do some interesting things to kind of take care of their problems. And it's like,
it might scare me personally. Like when I hear about people tell me they're using sleeping meds, I'm like,
well, yeah,
I was prescribed them once and I remember I threw them out because I was so afraid of getting hooked on them and then having to stop them and not being able to sleep. Like insomnia is like a big fear of mine.
Yeah. And like the other thing is too, when you take these sleeping medications, it overrides a chemical, construct in your sleep cycle. So when you start replacing that, your body doesn't have to get into that, which there's certain situations like, I know some people have been through some pretty traumatic stuff. So, they've had to go on sleeping meds, and that makes sense.
But just like anything, some people use them when they probably don't need to use them. And then they,
of course,
in a bad situation with them, right? Just like anything else, but yeah, I think for me, like, weed, I mean, definitely helps a lot in contest prep. Obviously it's something you need to watch if you have trouble sticking to your diet. But if you have discipline that way, like I find, like you said, especially being on a diet, being on a lot of androgens, it really helps keep you calm and keep you relaxed because we all know what certain androgens can do to you and like what kind of mood they can put you in and how irritable you can be. So smoking weed or taking an edible can really help level you out and just keep you like calmer. But I think honestly, for me, the biggest benefit for me with weed has been in the off season, especially this last off season when I put on a lot of size. It helped
keeping your appetite up.
Helped me eat so much. Yeah. I think the two biggest things that helped me the most were like smoking weed so I could eat, and then smoking weed and having a CPAP machine so I could sleep good.
Oh, bro, the CPAP is game changer
in the off season, right? Because
well, just Yeah, it's true.
You're growing, right?
Yeah, well, you're getting that oxygen consistent. And the thing is too, what people don't understand is there's a lot of people that don't need it, but when you start getting into the like position where you're stopping to breathe so many times, you can't get into that REM sleep. Yeah. And when you have the CPAP on, you actually get into that deep sleep and you stay in that sleep cycle all night. So, I mean, like for me, man,
like 6 hours straight.
Yeah. And then when you do, you wake up, you're ready to go, and your body actually processes all the fluid, reduces, you have a huge reduction in inflammation because your body actually has a chance to go in to that deep sleep and actually recover and flush everything out and metabolize your metabolism. So this is all that stuff, man.
This is my first prep with it. And like, I think my sleep quality is amazing. And I think
it's
helping me tremendously, man. Like this prep honestly feels easy, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
well, because you get a good sleep on that. You're not waking up already irritable when you're already irritable.
Yeah.
Like you're already in a suppressed state. Your body fat is going down. Your energy intake is going down. Your expenditure is going up. Like you're already there. So it's like when you don't have that proper sleep quality, you're just going to be that more irritable and off. And
we want to optimize the things you can control, right? But anyway, back to weed. So I would say the cons of weed are that
there's quite a few.
Okay, I'll tell you what. The biggest one. So I think you can't smoke a lot of weed if you're a natural bodybuilder. Because
I understand.
It will suppress your natural testosterone.
You also override your own body's hormonal production by influencing it with a specific thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So exactly. Now it's completely different when you're enhanced, obviously, because you're taking synthetic testosterone.
It's already there.
Your test is
you're managing it.
Your test is going to be what it's going to be, right? You're not suppressing it with weed. But yeah, so if you smoke a lot of weed, it will suppress your natural testosterone. So if you're a natural bodybuilder, it's something you got to watch out for.
Yeah, and I would say another decreased problem with it just in general is misuse, in the sense of so-and-so is smoking an indica when they should probably use sativa, or so-and-so is using a sativa when they should probably be using an indica, or so-and-so is using an edible when they should not be taking an edible. Like, it's the misuse of the strain. And it's a huge difference, man, because you can take somebody who, like, application wise, this is going to work really well with them, but then they have an indica and then they're like all messed up and they're like, man, that was horrible. Like, you know, blah, blah, blah. Or like my appetite was to the roof, or the other way around. They use a sativa and they're like, man.
Okay, we're back. So we were talking about, being strain sensitive. So you definitely have to figure out what strains work best for you, because like you said, Dana, like, you know, some of that should be maybe using a sativa, you know, maybe they smoke that at night before they go to bed and like they have a bad experience and then they kind of like write it off, when it could be something that could actually benefit them if they like use it, right?
Yeah. And like the other thing is too, a lot of that comes from, like, there's people that, you know, they're like, for example, they're in a prep and there's something and someone's like, oh man, like you should like just have a puff here and there. And then they go get something. They have no idea. And then they go before the gym, they're going to have a little puff. They smoke like an indica, and then they're like falling asleep their whole workout. Like they're like knocked out. Right. And then it's like, what's the point?
One of my buddies, like, you know, hardly ever smokes. And this guy works really hard, just like in business and stuff like that. And he decided to go get a 1 gram joint of sativa.
Oh.
And he sat on his back deck and smoked it to himself.
Oh,
man, yeah. Like one of the worst weed experiences I ever heard. Like hiding under his kitchen table, like waiting for it to be over, kind of thing. Like, you know, like he was gonna die. And it scares you, and I understand. Like I've seen people have really bad experiences, and it sucks, and you feel bad for them because you know they just like smoked a bit too much or took too much of an edible. And we've all been there. Like, you know, even me, like being an experienced weed smoker, like in recent years, I've taken too many edibles and just been like,
oh, dude, those are the
worst. You gotta
worst.
sit around and like focus on not dying, basically.
Yeah, there's a timer, and it doesn't go out until it's gone.
Yeah, exactly. And
you know,
and taking too many edibles sucks because it takes so long, right? It's in your system for so long.
And that's the problem. People are like, I'm gonna have another half. I'm gonna eat another bit. And it's like, yo, and they're like,
no one has patience on it. No one has patience. Yeah. At least if you smoke too much, like an hour and you're good.
Oh man, like I had a really bad one once upon a time. I won't say who, like I won't say the girl, but but went to a movie theater, right? And so we had like we had smoked before, went to the movie, and we had this like 300 milligram, and I didn't really know, right? But it was a candy, like a gummy. So then we both had a little bit or whatever, and then in the movie we ended up splitting the rest of it, like just not like in the movie, you know, we ended up eat like 150 each. We couldn't leave the theater, man. We couldn't get out. Like when the movie finally stopped, like we couldn't get out of the chairs. It took us 45 minutes, man, and we're in the IMAX. And then we were like, I was like looking at her and she was looking at me, and we were like, couldn't even talk to each other, man. And then like after like a little bit, I was like, we gotta get out of here. And we made it like to the car, and I got in the car, and it was like every time I closed my eyes, it was like I was falling down a hallway. And then she puked like 12 times, man, like door open. And everybody like pulling out with all their cars on, man. I was like sketch. I had to leave and like do laps around the car. It was horrible, man. Dude, eventually, like it took 2 hours to leave. Like it took us 3 hours to get home.
One time, I had a story like that, but it was like mushroom. So basically, I was with some of my friends, and I ate a big meal, and we're getting way off track here, but fuck it.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, and yeah, we went out for a supper, and we kind of like went home, we chilled out, and then we took some mushrooms. And I guess because we ate too much food, like they just weren't hitting right. So I was like, 3 hours went by, and like, you know, kind of felt a little like funny or whatever, but I was like, you know, this is not going to work, whatever. So I left, and I was like, I'm going to go get some Mary Browns or something and go home. So
Mary Browns.
So I went to this like this I don't even know where I went after. It was Mary Browns or something like that, and got my food, which was an experience in itself. And then just as I was leaving the drive-through, I was in this. It was like connected to like a grocery store parking lot. I could not find my way out of the parking lot. I could not. Luckily, I lived like 2 minutes from where I was, and it was like an area I was really familiar with, so I managed to get myself home. But once I got through the door, I was just like, "Oh my god, I am so lucky!" Like that, I was not like that. I was at least somewhere where I knew where I was, because otherwise,
like just down the road.
Oh yeah, I was a good like 7 or 8 minutes just driving around the parking lot. Then I just had to stop and like roll my windows down and scope out exactly how to leave, because I was like, I'm gonna get pulled over here just driving around this parking lot. Like,
yeah, you doing okay, son? Yeah. Do you know how to get out of here?
Yeah. All right. Anyways, we got to move on from this question. So
yeah.
You got one. Your turn. Ask me something.
So the one I had, one of them I had was if you are required to do cardio and it's leg day, so that's obviously the pretext of like you're in a prep. When should you do the cardio? Fasted in the morning, which I would assume would be fast. So when you wake up, post workout, or later on in the day. So you go. What's your thoughts? So this is like it's a context of not should you do cardio on leg day, but you need to do cardio. So you're obviously in a fat loss situation. When should you do it? And that's a really good question, actually, because
it is a good question.
When you're in a calorie deficit, or you're in that situation, maybe you just had a refeed. Most people sometimes they're having refeeds on their leg day. Regardless, how would you employ the cardio, given that you are run down and it is a leg day, and for most people it's an important day? So go ahead.
If it's a weak body part, they're not doing cardio on that day.
Fair.
Because they have 6 other days of the week they can do it.
But that's not a part of the question. If you're required to do it, so if you had to do it, I agree with you. But yeah. Okay, so if they had to,
Well,
as
if
a
you have
coach.
to do it, I think, you know, and especially with legs, like you'd want to probably do the cardio fasting in the morning, and then you'd want to get like 2-3 meals in you, like to get some glycogen restored, like preferably like your carb meals. And then you'd want to have, I would say you want to have 2 carb meals before you train, because personally for me with legs, I don't want to have too many meals before I train legs, because you know, just having that much food in your system and the intensity of a leg workout can a lot of times make you like sick and not have a great workout. So for me, when I train legs, it's maximum 2 meals before. And then, you know, especially if you're lower carb and if you're at the point where you have to do cardio on leg day, I'm assuming your food is pretty low. So you're probably only going to have 1 carb meal left. And you definitely want at least 1 carb meal after legs. So that's how I would do it. I would do fasted cardio, 2 meals, train legs, 1 post-workout meal, and then however many meals you got left that are probably not going to have any carbs in them, safe for later in the day when you obviously don't need the energy because you're done training for the day.
Yeah.
So that's that's how I would do it.
I guess for me, it would be the same thing. Like there's 2 sides of it though. So it's either, well, actually 3. So typically, I mean, I typically, for most of my clients, my rule of thumb is like, you know, be consistent with when you're doing your cardio in your daily routine if you have one. But like, if you didn't do fasted cardio in the morning, like just get your cardio done for the day. Like you know, at the end of the day, like if you didn't do it fast in the morning, like I don't care. Get your cardio in. Like it's a part of the day, just do it. But usually, like you said, like fast in the morning is a good approach because first of all, you're not burning any of the food you're going to consume that day. The other side of it is too, especially if you're going to be training somewhere similar, like, you know, 2 to 3 hours within your leg training, you're going to get your legs warmed up. You know, you're going to get them moving. And then of course, eating afterwards, you're going to probably store a little bit more in your legs just because of general, you know, usage. The other thing is too, in the case of like low food, like you said, sometimes the best case is to just do it post-workout, because I don't really want them doing anything with their legs until they do legs. And then when they're already beat down and you got to do 30 to 40 minutes anyways, bang it out and then start getting more of your food back in. Right.
So
and just to flush
my
out,
thing
like,
then is like how good of if someone needs to do cardio,
yeah,
how hard,
exactly.
how intense can the cardio be right after leg workout?
Well, for sure. But the other part of it is too, is like for some, like I know some guys that for instance, training and then doing their cardio in that type of situation, especially after legs, it really helps them flush, like get everything moving. Right. I agree with you though. That's always going to depend. Like if you're going to be like super, like half of your intensity doing it post workout, then no. Like,
yeah, exactly. So it's something
right.
you got to weigh out yourself too. And like that's the other thing too. Like if legs is not like for me, I could probably do that because honestly, my leg workouts
wouldn't
right
matter,
now,
man. It
like
wouldn't
I'm still
matter when
training
you do it.
hard, but I'm going in and doing like 2 working sets for like 5 or 6 exercises. I could easily do cardio after my legs.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me. Like,
same with you, 100%.
My like,
you know, your legs are going to be your strongest body part regardless.
Yeah, but the other thing is too, like I think for you and me, where we're at with the whole contest prep mentality and just like what you need to do it, like if I just train legs, unless it was like so insane, like I'm going to be able to bang out the cardio intensity. I'm not going to ever, like, that's never been a thing. It's like, there's no, you know, for me, if it's like, I can't get the same intensity on a piece of equipment that I'd probably do, I would do something that I can. Right. So if it's maybe I can go on the bike and just hammer out bike, but maybe trying to like stand on the Stairmaster after doing legs and having like 500-600 pounds on my back, maybe that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
yeah.
No, if it's just like one lower intensity cardio session a week, it's not a big deal if you're doing hard cardio sessions like for your other 5
yes
sessions, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, exactly, like all these things depend on where you're at in your prep, how on track you are. You know, if you have to do cardio on leg day, that sucks, but you know, do what works best for you. You know, I just know for me, and if I declined, I would have to do it fasted and then basically.
Yeah. Well, so the general consensus, I guess, from us is you want to employ it. If you're doing it, it's not going to affect the intensity of your cardio, and it's not going to affect the actual leg training itself. So primarily that's going to be fasted in thinking from a food preservation aspect, because if you're required to do cardio, technically that means it's probably contest prep. So food's low.
It's optimal.
It's optimal. There you go.
All right. So, okay. So how do PEDs affect your day-to-day life as a bodybuilder?
Want me to go first?
I'm asking you.
Well, I think a lot of that comes down to three things.
Everything comes down to 2 or 3 things for you.
It goes down to 3 things. First of all, what are you using? Like in terms of compounds, like are you using testosterone or are you using?
Well, let's just talk about like the lifestyle, right? Like it's kind of a lifestyle, right? So like,
yeah,
I think for me, I'll just answer my own question first.
Okay, you answer first.
Just because of how I interpret the question, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's like, when you're at the point we're at, it's more of just like part of the lifestyle. Like, I think people think of steroids like it's this like big like unholy thing that you like do when like you're in this like dark side club or some shit, right? And it's just like, it honestly kind of sucks. It's probably the worst part about bodybuilding, but it's just like something you're always conscious of, because you need to time your entire life around like your cycles, essentially, right? Like literally, like my whole year is kind of dictated by like, okay, I need to do an off-season cycle for this long, and that got to be 16 weeks, and then I got to give myself 6 weeks to come off, and then I got to give myself 12 weeks to do another cycle before my show, and then I got to come off for 6 weeks and do another off-season cycle, and it's like, and then like you try to plan like these like vacations and family things and blood work like in between your cycles, so that you can like maybe have a few drinks or not have to be perfect on your diet. Because when you're a bodybuilder and you're taking it serious, if you're in the off season, you still want to make the most of your cycles, and you don't want to be going out drinking and eating shitty food. You still want to stay on your diet, make the most out of your off season. And obviously the same goes for prep. So it dictates your entire like yearly schedule, because you have to plan. If you're going to do this right and get the most out of this and cycle on and off properly, which is what we try to do. Like, we don't just do random cycles whenever we feel like it because we want to get big and look good in the summer, or, it's time to bulk up in the winter. Like, we're always getting ready for something. And there's always a purpose behind every cycle. Like, technically, like, we're always in prep for something, right? Like, we're in prep for prep, or we're in prep for a show. So, it all has so much purpose. So, when I read that question, that's how I think it affects my life, like almost every part of it. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a little bit better. Okay, that makes more sense. So if they're asking like how PEDs affect my life, I would say it's the same thing. It's a very overwhelming path. And I say that in a very unbiased way. It's overwhelming, but if you keep on top of the things, like for instance, schedule everything with a plan. So this is, I'm going to do, this, and this. Things will always change, but if you have an idea where you're going, what you're taking, how it's affecting you, getting your blood work done, for example, I was in the middle of one, and then we've had the gyms closed for 6.5 weeks. So I'm back on a cruise, because there's no point in continuing to take a pile of things and be sat at home like a moron. Like,
I did that so many times over like coronavirus shit.
Yeah, and it's like, so it's, like I said, it's very overwhelming, because you have to adjust and you have to lose the ego with it. You really do, because if you don't, it's going to be a very short, unpleasant time later on. You're going to have to pay for everything you do. And
it's so good to have that discipline, right? Like, to be halfway through a cycle and be like, okay, now I know I can't make the most of this because I don't have a gym. So let's not even bother putting that tax on my health, and just come off and wait.
Right? Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, it's an overwhelming thing that is completely dictated by a lot of things that are out of your control. Like, for example, the gyms are shut down. maybe you want to take a bunch of gear, but you know for a fact you don't have the tools to the tools to make the progress you know that risk is going to bring. Or maybe you get injured and you're in the middle of a prep. Well, now you have to plan to come off, or maybe you can't get something. There's people that are in those situations. Like, you have to be very conscious of what you're doing. So that being said, they affect your life in a very overwhelming way, but it doesn't need to be overwhelming. Because like for me, I'm getting my blood work done. I know where my health markers are. Yeah. So like, I'm not blindly like, oh man, I haven't got my blood work for 5 years. Hopefully everything's, you know what I mean? Like,
ignorance is bliss.
It's a controlled, overwhelming thing that you have to keep it under wraps, or else it will get the best of you. So that's the best way I could describe it.
Yeah, man. And it all comes down to your health. Like, you always got to put your health first. That, like, even me, man, like, I was talking to the promoters of these shows coming up and being like, I was like, if these shows get pushed anymore, I was like, I'm just letting you know I'm out, because I'm not willing to do what I have to do for that long.
Yeah.
I'm like, because there's bigger shows coming up later that I got to get ready for. So
yeah, absolutely.
And I was just straight up, it's like, listen, like, I want to compete more than anything, but like, I'm not doing something that I know is stupid just to get there.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. Like, it's controlled chaos. That's an even better way, right? Like, so you're probably good for a good, like, 20 weeks a year, like hard 20 weeks, which that could be 2 different preps, like, 10 hard weeks this prep, or, you're probably good, being in control of everything to get that out of your system, like your best physique, your best metabolism, your best growth. So it's like, if you just keep, oh, we're going to push the show and keep doing another 8 weeks, like, it doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that. No.
Everything down regulates your body.
Nope.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too. Like, sometimes, like, I've been in situations where, things just haven't been the best mentally. So it's like, you have this idea in your head, you want to do this, but there's all this other stuff going on. You got this happening in your life and this, and then I've taken the choice sometimes to be like, I'm just going to do it anyways. And it's never good.
Yeah,
it's not.
I know, man.
Like, you can't, you have to have things lined up and straight and on point and disciplined. And you don't, but you do, because you don't have to, but guess what? It's going to be like just horrible. So.
Are you got another question
there? Yes. So this one is, hold on, PD one. So Trenbolone, side effects and benefits.
I'm on trend right now.
You don't look like it.
No, it's the lighting, bro. It's just the lighting.
No, So, how are you feeling?
It's like,
good, man.
No, dude, this is the best I've felt on it for sure. But also, like, I'm in the best environment I've ever been in a prep. Like, literally every show I've done before this, I was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do cardio, training clients for like 6 hours a day, and just doing that grind, right? And now,
like, doing the early morning, like, the social thing, like, in people's face, like, good job, dude. Good work.
Totally different, man. And like, now I'm sleeping in every day as long as I want, getting up and doing cardio when I want, just super relaxed, like, super, like, not very stressful environment at all. With 2 minutes from the gym, like, so yeah, like, I'm pretty good, man. I gotta say, like, I do feel like I have my moments when I'm driving for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or like, if I forget to make rice and I'm hungry, like, like, there's definitely those, getting upset about things that you probably shouldn't get upset over, but also, combine that with, like you said, like, being on a diet and things like that.
Absolutely.
Which is something I haven't done in a couple of years, is in a calorie deficit.
Yeah, because you haven't been doing a show, and most people don't know, it's extremely stupid to use Trenbolone outside of a very, very meticulous, high level need. Like, if you're just taking it for the summer, And I know lots of guys, I'm not saying anything about anybody. I'm just saying that like, I'd rather not, man. Like
recreational trend is not okay.
No, it's not at the end of the day.
It's not necessary. And everyone most people that do it regret it.
It's the same thing like cigarettes, man. If you smoke these, you will die.
Yeah.
But you're still probably going to have a pack if you smoke them, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things. Like, so that goes to the other part of the question, the benefits. So, I mean, like I'll speak a little bit on the benefits. Like the benefits are very, very hard to comprehend. So if you're somebody who hasn't used it, like this is just an example. So the first time I employed it, I was like 19. And this was like for my first show I was doing. So I think I did like a couple 100 milligrams of nth or whatever a week. And I was like my training was peak. Like every week I was like training to failure. So I've never been a big bencher. That's just an example. So I was doing like 225 for like 8. Like that was my like top set. And I remember I did bench, and then I remember I took it. And then 6 days later, I went back to bench. And it was the only thing I changed. Diet was the same. I just added that in. Dude, I did 275 for like 12.
Oh, yeah.
Like 5 days later. And it was like, and then my deadlift went to like 505 for 12. Like everything, like, so just in terms of, for me, it's always been a huge change in strength endurance. Like not strength, like I didn't lift 100 pounds more, but it was like I could do 50 pounds more on this, 60 pounds more on that for like double the reps, and then probably another set. And of course, like fat loss, metabolism, there's a huge, you just know everything is like 2 to 3 days faster.
You're on fire. Yeah.
Yeah. And like in terms of lower caloric diets, like, so if you're coaching somebody who's employing that in their regiment, like you can get away with some pretty stupid dieting things like, hey, you're really behind, like we're going to go 0 carbs for like 3 days because you don't have much choice. They won't really lose much muscle. They'll just, so you can get away with dieting hacks that don't really work, but because they're using XYZ like trend, it's like you pretty much aren't really going to screw around with
the biggest thing, and like basically what you said, is that it allows you to stay very strong during prep.
Yes. And your nitrogen retention is just through the roof, man.
And the key thing to maintaining muscle as you go through prep is staying fucking strong.
Yeah.
Like as soon as you start lifting less weights, you know, because people just get tired and they just don't, you know what I mean? They're like, oh, I'll just do more reps. Like that's when you start burning through muscle because you're telling your body that you don't need to be as big anymore, right? So if you use trend and it allows you to maintain your strength as you're burning body fat off, well, that's what's going to give you the ideal end result, right?
Absolutely. And
what people need to understand about what trend is for and what it does, and that's basically its main purpose.
And that's I've noticed that's allowed me to keep a lot more food into clients' preps. So
carbs especially, I find.
Yes, because like in terms of my mentality, like coaching somebody into a show, it's like my expectation is that your numbers aren't going down, just your energy. Like you should still be able to do 405 at 5 or 4 weeks out. But mentally, when you kind of get them into that level and say they're using something like that, they can and they will. And then food wise, so because they're maintaining their strength, they need more food all the time, you know, because they're actually maintaining their strength and getting leaner. So it's like their weight drops, they're flatten out big time. So I'm always finding that I need to keep, you know, more refeed days in, more like, especially carbs. It's like, you know, and that's just kind of part of the process of like, you know, keeping your strength high.
Yeah.
But using it.
Yeah. Well, exactly. You want to keep your strength as high as you can while you're getting the job done of taking away the body.
And some guys just hit that wall and they can't push themselves to like, you know.
I find for me, like I'm taking 300 milligrams of tren a week. With 300, this is going into another question. Someone asked me what my current cycle is. So.
Oh, okay.
But I like talking about my doses just because I know I'm on a lot less than people think I'm on. just based off my size. I think people relate size with dosages.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that like 300 to 400 milligram range is all you need if it's real. Like if it's not underdosed, like
I have no interest in taking any more of that.
No, you can't. If it's good, you can't. Trust me.
And besides that, just 300 milligrams of mass probe and 750 milligrams of test a week, and 50 milligrams of Winstrol a day. That's it.
That's pretty much what I took my last cycle.
Dude, that's a good contest prep cycle,
man. Patrick had me take. It was 200, like, so where you're at in your weeks, like where I was at, it was 200 milligrams of test probe every other day. And it was 100 milligrams of tren and 100 milligrams of mass like every other day. So it worked out to be 300 a week of that. And I think maybe 600 of probe. And then it was 30 milligrams of Winstrol.
Oh, wow.
And I think 50 milligrams of probe iron, but the fat burners.
Oh, well, fat burners, I don't count.
Yeah. But that's all what's in.
They're harmless drugs.
And I mean, that's been generalized for me, like throughout most of my preps.
Yeah.
That kind of range. And I think now, which it's funnier because I've been improving with not a significant change in the amount per week, but I think it's also along the same lines of, they talk about volume in terms of a beginner lifter, an intermediate, and then an advanced lifter. Like they notice that people that have been lifting for a long time, you don't need as much volume generally.
Oh, yeah,
and I think it's the same thing with PEDs, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of progress.
Like as long as you blast and cruise properly and give your receptors breaks, then
absolutely,
if you're giving your receptors the break, then they should be resensitized to still have a reaction to the same dosages that you were getting a response from before, right?
But it also comes down to genetics too.
Oh, well, yeah.
It does. Like there's a lot of guys that, trust me, taking those kind of dosages, they won't have the expected results. But the other thing of it is that if you really want to find, regardless of what you or me take, you really want to find a dose that is the least minimal to make progress.
Absolutely. That's my biggest thing.
And on top of that as well, you got to think about like what you're doing, or if you have a coach that's telling you, like, does it make sense? Does it sound like that's a good idea? If you're taking like 18 different things at high doses and you're 180 pounds
exactly. That's the thing too, man. It's crazy. Like you really just,
there's a point of no return, right? There's a point of diminishing returns. There's only so many receptor sites.
And if you're at the point where you got to start doing like high doses just to get a response, like you're in trouble, because
you should probably come off.
Yeah, you need to come off. Absolutely. Man, it's unbelievable to me. Like I talk to guys that like tell me they've been on for like 6 months, even up to a year of like high doses. And I'm like, if I get to like the 20-week mark, which like I can't even remember the last time I did that. I think the longest my cycle has been in recent history would be 16 weeks. I'm just like, okay, that's good. But
Morgan,
and at that point I'd probably stop making progress anyway, especially if it's off season.
Yeah. But what's the difference, or like what's the thing that we have in common? We have a coach.
Oh yeah.
And
we've had so many coaches that we know, like, this is a common practice amongst good coaches.
But that's the other thing too. Like this ties into all the other questions too. Like, how does this affect you? When do you do this? How, like, these are all things, like we said, it's an overwhelming experience. Like if you're going to go down that path and you're going to make that personal decision to take exogenous hormones, we've always had proper advisors. We've always had proper coaches along the way. Maybe not the best at all the times. Maybe there's like, you look back and, that was something that both of you and them were learning, but like, we've always seeked out proper guidance. Hey, I'm going to take this risk. Please, help me with this decision, and I think that's the big difference too, is guys are trying to, even come on here and take advice from a podcast and then go do their own thing. It's like the biggest thing you can do is hire someone who knows what they're doing.
Well, that's why we got to keep reiterating that, right? And
yeah,
if you're going to try to figure it out on your own or anything like that, obviously just start with like low dose
Exactly.
is everything. You know what I mean? Like, can you hear my dogs?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, sorry everybody.
That's all right.
There's probably a dog walking in front of my house. Yeah. Okay. So that will lead into our last question, because that's one more question I have there, and that's like mistakes that we have made with PEDs, or it doesn't even have to be us. You know, just common mistakes with PEDs.
Yeah.
Trying to think. I to be honest with you, most of my most memorable mistakes are with diuretics before a show, and just
man,
taking them when
yeah,
I just didn't need to take them, and things like that. As far as mistakes with PEDs go, you know, probably I'll tell you what, oral steroids in the off season, or oral steroids when you're trying to gain mass, like in a bulk, are dumb. Oral steroids
common mistake.
are for prep.
Common mistake, and well, realistically too, they're a minimalist option if you're thinking long term, because there's more than just the benefits. Like the way you're employing them puts so much stress on your system, right? And that's what people forget. Like, oh, I'm going to ingest this.
Understand with orals that, okay, exactly, it's a short-term benefit. So if you're looking for a short-term benefit, like you would before a show, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. If you want to bang out 4 weeks of orals before you go on vacation, that's fine. But understand that, you know, after that week that you come back from your vacation, like you're not going to look the same as a week. Like,
yeah. What about their liver set up for vacation?
Well, you just need to pound milk thistle, man. Obviously, you're fine, man.
Yeah, like short term for sure, they're very manageable in terms of problems. But like you said too, it's just employing orals in a very, you know, just a sense of like, this doesn't make sense, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. So like, you know, I would say from my own experience, like I one thing for me that I used to try to do all the time, you know, just because back when I kind of was first getting into this, like running D-ball or Anadrol with your off-season cycle was common courtesy. And like, you know, you would read up on cycles and be like, okay, for the first 8 weeks, do 50 milligrams of Anadrol or 50 milligrams of D-ball. And those drugs like killed my appetite. And
yeah,
for one long off season, like I had this coach that was really insistent that I used it. And I struggled to eat, like hated eating, still did it. I still did it, but man, I was like, it was brutal. And then when I first started working with Dorian, like that was one thing, like right away, there was no orals in the off season.
No.
And
same with Patrick. He doesn't do, we honestly, since I've started working with him, it's been very little, like it's hardly been a part of the conversation of any of our plans. It's been like, usually, and this is typically how I like to use them, is they're very interchangeably, like a week to 2 weeks at a certain sticking point, you know, where, you know, you're 4 or 5 weeks in, progress is starting to slow down. You start adding in something very minimal for a short period of time, mostly for the training benefits, to kind of push you through that strength plateau, you know, through that endurance plateau, because your immediate training endurance, like, and strength endurance. And then, you know, after a while, you know, I might have guys saying like, dude, like this week, my appetite, it's like, hey, if your appetite's starting to go down, like, no, like there's time to get them out. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, and because you ultimately you're basing your cycles around the injectables. You know, that's going to be your primary, you know, saturation of your
that's like
blood
90%
levels
of it, right? Like, you know, I think of orals, like you said, like before prep, like a little bit of Winstrol, and it just makes you look harder, and like, and you're only going to see that if you're shredded anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, to me, you know, Anadrol, D-ball, drugs like that have use in the off season. Like, I mean, if you can tolerate them, maybe. But like, again, like, are they going to yield any like long lasting effects like the injectables that you're already taking are going to? You know, so that's what I mean. It's like, are you going to get the same end result with or without it? Like, if you're going to get the same result without it as you would with it, then you should go without it, because 4 weeks of Anadrol is not going to be good on your body.
However, like I know a few guys that have no issues with appetite from orals. Like they could eat the whole house. And so in that regard, in terms of like, not that, like, I know I've known a few guys, like it's easy to employ them for a month in their plans and not have to really worry about like, this is really backwards.
Yeah, genetics, man. Like it might be great for some people for full,
but it's not typical, right? So,
and at a high level, at like a pro level, you don't see orals in many off-season drug plans.
No,
I would not imagine. No one that's like up to date on information and is kind of like like in the newer school way of thinking, right?
Yeah, and the other thing is too. Okay, so what PED mistakes that I made? I would say not getting blood work done for like when I was younger. Like, so absolutely. From probably the time I was 19, 18, like I think when I was 20 and a half, I think that's when I first got blood work done. And the only reason I got it done is because I was taking ADHD medication again. And my doctor, because I've always been honest and open with what I do, she made me go see a cardiologist and like do a whole thing, get all my blood work done to like, so I actually went to the specialist in Halifax, and because I'd had a cardiogram, 2 of them done. And it was like, at that point, you know, she was like, I don't even know why you're here. She was like, what are you doing here? She was like, you have like one of the best cardiograms I've ever seen come in here. She was like, you do not need to be here. I was like, I don't know. They told me I needed to be here because I take steroids. And they were like, what? Like, that has nothing to do with what you're getting prescribed for. So she was like, well, you're obviously kind of have an idea what you're doing. So just keep being safe, I guess.
Keep being safe. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that's probably one of the, mistakes. If I could find one that's actually like wasn't a huge problem. Yeah. I didn't have any like, issues because I didn't, but thinking back, like that's a pretty, I didn't take that serious.
Yeah, but you know what? Like back then too, it's like we didn't have people on YouTube and Instagram screaming in our faces telling us to go get it done either.
No.
And that's the way it is now, right? Where it's like all these guys out there saying to like go do that. So that's what made me do it. Like I didn't start going and probably get my blood work done consistently till like 2016, 2017. And a lot of that was because I had my family doctor sent me to a specialist, and me and the specialist have a really good relationship. And he sent me to get a stress test done, like when I was 330 pounds, to make sure my heart was good. And and like he actually understands PEDs, so we can sit down and have a conversation. And like I always tell him what I'm doing. He kind of we get my blood work done, and then if I'm healthy, he's like, okay, you can go ahead and do the cycle time, right? But yeah, I think that's probably the most common mistake. But I don't think there's an excuse for that anymore, right? Because I think how much has changed and how much awareness is out there now.
So I actually have a video on my YouTube going to get my blood work done and like getting there and getting it done and going over all the tests I'm doing. And that was like from 2017, like December. So, and like, it's nice because, especially with like the coaches, like I worked for with Matt Jansen for a while, back when I won nationals, and, working with Patrick and just everybody, it's always been something that, they want to have that data. They want to have those numbers. So I would get it and like, send them. So I have my history from like the past.
Dorian was the same way.
Yeah. And I mean, that's also too, I think in terms of coaching now, like, there's no excuse as a competitor or a person to not get their blood work done, but as a coach, there's no excuse to not ask that from your athletes, because at the end of the day, everything's a personal choice. But for me, when I'm working with my clients, I'm always feel like it's that sense of responsibility that like, I need to make sure that they understand how important it is. And I want to actually see the data so that I can make better choices. Like, I don't want to just,
well, that's what I was going to say too. Like, if you have a client, especially using PEDs, and like they're not responding right, and like their appetite's fucked up, and like
something might be off, man.
Signs, right? Like the signs of like an unhealthy person. Like their sleep's not good, their digestion's not good, they're stressed, and like
something's off.
You can go get your blood work done because maybe what we're doing here is like just digging a big hole. To dig out of later, right?
Yeah, and it's also a good way too. Like, it's also a good thing too for, when they finish a show, like, when are we going to continue to like do a progress or, get back into things? And it's like, well, let's have a look at your blood work. Like, where are your markers at now? Even though you're not taking everything you just were, but have things recovered? Like, are things semi-normal? How is your head? That's the other thing too, is I would say not paying attention to the seriousness of how my emotional and mental perception of things changed, because it's a slow, like you start at like 18, 19, like I did, on and off, but then you're also doing more intense stuff and shows. You don't realize that 5 to 6 months that you're on, here, just your perception, your mental,
your awareness of like the possibility.
How are you responding to people? How are you like coming off? Like, where
also, like,
checking yourself, man.
Too, like you kind of think you're invincible, right?
Absolutely,
you
man.
You don't even consider, because you're like, I'm young, like I'm not gonna have to worry about this for a long time. But then you turn 25, 26, and you're like, okay, I've been doing this shit for 6 years now. I've done 7 or 8 shows. Like,
yeah.
Now because then like you're like, okay, something could be happening.
Yeah. Well, and I mean,
I better make sure, right?
Yeah,
like,
and you start having
kind of what happened to me.
Yeah, and I mean, you start having a difference in like, relationships. So then you start to get the feedback, like, so this consistently, when I do X, Y, Z, this is something that, my last 5 girlfriends have been like, yeah. So you get like this when this happens.
And you don't want to be that guy.
No. It's one of those things. Like I said, it's an overwhelming thing. And oftentimes it's the same thing with dieting and all that stuff. Like, people send you progress pictures and they're like, what do you think? And you're like, you look phenomenal. And they're like, really? It's like, you see yourself every day. It's the same thing with your mental perception. Like, you see yourself every day. You think with yourself every day. So sometimes, especially if you're dieting or whatever you're doing, like, you just don't, if you don't have people that are checking you, sometimes you don't check yourself.
Yeah, it's so true, man.
Yeah. And sometimes you do have people checking you, but it's always like a shit show.
All right. Well, we're coming up on our hour time limit there now. So we'll conclude part 1 here. And so that was our first Q&A. Hope you guys enjoyed it. But we are going to have a part 2 segment to this, because we do have a lot more questions that we want to get through and address. But yeah, man, thanks for coming on. We got through.
Yeah, no problem.
Good. And we'll get on again in a few days and finish up the part 2.
All right, perfect.
Brother. Thanks a lot, man.
See you guys later.
All right, everyone.
Hope you guys enjoyed
watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram for more good content, and we will see you again soon.
Yeah.